Hi there. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the role of operations management and more specifically looking at the strategic role of operations management. So firstly, what does strategic even mean? Well, strategic means that it affects all areas of the business. Now, every one of the four key business functions, operations, marketing, finance, and human resources, they all have a strategic role because each one of those key business functions affects all areas of the business. Okay? Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at the different ways that operations can affect all areas of the business. Now, one of the ways it does that is through things like costs. Now, there are a number of costs involved in the operations function, okay? So one of them is input costs. So the costs involved with actually purchasing the raw materials that'll then need to be transformed later on. There's also the labor costs. So the costs involved in having people, actual human beings, work in the operations side of the business, the operations function, and transform those raw materials. So there's a cost there involved as well. There's processing costs. So the actual transformation itself, that process involves costs as well. Inventory costs, so costs involved with warehousing, okay, storage, distribution as well. So how do you actually get your product? Where do you store it? How do you keep it safe in transit? How do you get it to the customers? And finally, quality management. So paying to have those systems in place to make sure that the quality of the product meets the benchmark standards of what the business is actually wanting to achieve. Okay. Now, in terms of those costs, finding ways to minimize those costs is important for the operations function, because by minimizing costs, it allows, generally speaking, the price that the customers would pay to come down, making the good or service more affordable. Now, if the good or service is more affordable, you'd find that you generally would have more customers purchasing the products. So if more customers purchase the products, then you'll find that there's more funds available in the business to then be distributed, and so on and so on. So as you'd find that this is something that affects all areas of the business. So that's why it's a strategic role. Okay? So those costs do flow on through all those other key business functions. So if you can minimize them, it's better for the business. Another way that the operations function is strategic is in cost leadership. Now, this means that the business is aiming to have either the lowest costs or be the most price competitive business in the market, in the industry there. So again, finding a way to lower those costs means that you've also now going to have a competitive advantage over your competitors, because your point of differentiation here may not be quality, it may not be design, it may not be convenience, but it might just simply be price. Now, one way that a business can be a cost leader in the market is through economies of scale. Now, what this does is it allows cost advantages to occur because the business is buying the inputs, the raw materials, or any other input they have at a lower cost per unit. So the more they buy, okay, the more units. So every time they increase by one unit, generally the price comes down. So basically looking at, another way is buying in bulk or buying in mass. Okay, so if a business is buying planks of wood in order to turn them into tables, for example, if they were to purchase one plank of wood, it'll cost them a lot more if they were to purchase, say, 1 million planks of wood, and that might come down to the lumber factory that is making the wood that they're buying them from. They need to pay someone. They need to turn on machinery. They need to pay their utilities if they produce one plank, but all those costs, go down if they're producing, more planks of wood. And that price then flows on to the business that's buying those planks of wood. And then because they're making more Okay, they're mass producing. Eventually, when you, the consumer, goes to buy that table, the price as well should also be relatively low because the business was able to manufacture such a high quantity of them because they were able to buy a high quantity of raw materials or inputs at a low cost. So that's one way of being a cost leader, by having the lowest costs and being price competitive, not just with the the end product and offering things like, sales or promotions, but right from the start, right from the input stage of the operations function. Another way that businesses can be strategic in their operations is through goods differentiation. Okay, how do they differentiate their goods on the market? And one way is to vary the actual product features. So actually change what the product does compared to what the products of competitors do. Okay, changing the quality of it. Okay, making it either more higher quality or lower quality depending on what market you're actually trying to aim. Are you aiming at high income earners with high disposable income? Are you aiming at low income earners with low disposable income? Are you looking at affordability? Are you looking at costs involved? And that changes quality. Varying any augmented features, so offering customization here. So, for example, car manufacturers offer people the option to have, for example, seat warmers, or the option to have, add a spoiler to their boot. So, varying those augmented features, so those little add-ons. You can do this into services as well, not just for goods, but also services. So, varying the amount of time spent on a service. Okay, someone that does their taxes, you might take an hour to do someone's taxes as opposed to half an hour, but within that, you're offering them a lot more in the service. So you might be also offering, bookkeeping, or giving them a tutorial on how to do things themselves as well. Changing the level of expertise as well, so the knowledge you bring to it. What qualifications and experience does the service provider actually have? If you're going to getting a service done by someone who might only have, let's say, a TAFE certificate, as opposed to someone who's got a TAFE diploma or a university degree, that changes the level of experience and qualifications that someone has, and that's something that can differentiate that service for the business. And also varying the quality of materials or technology used in the service delivery. So, for example, builders. You might have one builder who still operates using, a shovel and, a wheelbarrow and, that sort of stuff, as opposed to their competitor who's invested in concrete machines, in bobcats, in automated, diggers. That then varies the technology used and the type of materials that can be used for that business, for that service. And finally, another way that the operations management is strategic is through cross-branding. Okay, now this can also be known as strategic alliances, and that's basically when two different businesses differentiate their goods and or services by basically working together. Okay, they're not actually changing the product, just changing how the customers, how the consumers, get that product. An example would be, Woolworths and Caltex. They've and Coles and Shell as well, where they've cross-branded. They formed a strategic alliance. You still get petrol. You can still get your service station fare. You can now access Coles or Woolworths related items in that. So they're not changing the product, they're just changing how people can access the product and interact with the product. Another example here is this Philadelphia cheese spread that is it's Cadbury chocolate spread. Okay, now again, it's just making it easier, or getting another way for a customer to access or interact with that product through that cross-brand. Now, I really hope that this video has given you enough information in terms of the strategic role of operations management. The next video in this HSC course on operations is the interdependence of the key business functions. Thank you.